Does your school have all the key elements in place for them to be able to open and stay open safely? I'm Dr. Darria, your go-to on the front lines of ER doctor and a mama of two, which means I'm looking at all the evidence to help find the best ways to protect you and your family and make your life healthier, better, and easier. And I wanted to dive in on what I call the 3 keystone elements that schools have to have. I talked about this on CNN the other day, and a lot of you had questions on what are these 3 keystone elements? Can you give us more details? So I wanted to dive in on these. And again, not every school can do all of these, and some schools have a prevalence in the community that is so high that they probably cannot open safely at this moment. But if your prevalence is low enough and a school can do these 3 key element categories, that is the best hope we have to be able to protect our students, to protect our teachers. Let me dive in. So first is you think about the 3 places that they need to focus on. The 3 keystone elements are: 1, how do you decrease the virus from walking in the door of the school? How do you decrease it from spreading within the school? And thirdly, how do you rapidly identify cases and quickly quarantine them and isolate them from everybody else? These are the 3 things we have to do. Schools cannot a la carte this, by the way. If you look at the camp in Georgia, they did one of these things. They tested people before they came in. That's good. But then they didn't have kids wearing masks. Kids were doing all the activities, singing and all the other normal camp activities. They were sleeping together in cabins without masks, without increased ventilation. And those cabins had anywhere from 16 to 26 kids. Y'all, I am not surprised that they had an outbreak. We cannot assume that we can just start back activities and pretend COVID doesn't exist. If we wish for our schools to not only open, but to stay open, schools have to do these 3 things. So again, the first one is, how do you decrease the disease from entering, walking in your door? In part, this is just a factor of what the prevalence of the disease is in your community. That's going to partly do that. But schools can do some things. Some schools are able to test people before school even starts. So at least you have an idea of what the prevalence is in your community. Another thing is community mobility. This is crucial. And by mobility, I mean, how much are people going about their day and lives as they did before COVID happened? Studies show that if people are doing 80% of those things, that includes, going to bars and social activities, then schools have 2 times the risk of outbreaks and having to shut down, versus if people do 70% or less. Restricting your activities still, schools have the greatest chance of being able to open and stay open. This depends on your community to drive what goes in the door. Another thing schools can do is symptom checkers. So some schools are doing these via apps. Some schools are not doing them via an app, but they're just saying it's a community question parents are being asked every day. Does your child or anybody in your family have these symptoms potentially of COVID? Those are some really key ways you can prevent it from coming in the door, and it depends on the community. And then the school can help also by doing testing as they can. Second is, how do you decrease spread of the COVID inside? Because even if 1 or 2 cases or some number of cases of COVID come in your door, the key thing then is that you don't want them to spread. So 1 is masking. If your school does not have universal masking requirements for all teachers and all students, and I'm talking kindergarten and up, then I get concerned. Because we know that even if kids may get COVID and may spread it less than adults, it's not that they don't. They still do. And we know that children don't keep distance. They don't know personal space. So they need to all be wearing masks. If you have questions about your child wearing masks, I know a lot of people do. I have kids, they're 3 and 6. I just created a free guide for parents to use to get your child very comfortable wearing a mask to the point that they just forget they're wearing them and they're not touching them and not doing those sort of things. If you're a teacher, please share this guide with your students. If you're a parent, please do this, because we don't want our teachers having to teach how to wear masks on day 1. If they do, we're going to have more outbreaks. So masking. Keeping distance, 6 feet matters as much as possible. Try to keep it with the younger kids, but especially important with the older, or with everybody, of course, but the older, it's probably easier to do. If a school cannot keep distance because they have too many students, that is a situation where they may need to go to alternate days of schedule. So half the school or a third of the school comes one day and then half the other day. If that's the only way that you can keep adequate distance in your school, then do that. We've seen pictures again of a school in Georgia. I don't know why Georgia's being used for a lot of the bad examples right now. This is my backyard. But that school just showed tons of kids just walking through hallways, no masks. I mean, it was just packed. That's not gonna work. You do that, we're going to see outbreaks. This is not rocket science. So distance, alternating days if you have to, or staggered schedules. Small cohorts are ideal, groups of less than 10. Again, studies have shown that if the groups are less than 10, that's going to mitigate the amount of transmission you have. And if you do have a positive case in that class, then you're just sending home 10 people as opposed to a larger group. And of course, increasing ventilation, leaving windows open if you can, increasing your ventilation systems and filters if schools have the resources. Some schools with even more resources are using things like thermal scanning, different ways to just kind of catch it early. So third is rapid identification, and then this really key is very conservative isolation. And I don't mean conservative like your political party. There's no politics here. I mean saying that if we want to keep the majority of children in school, then that means that anybody who remotely has a positive contact, we're sending them home, because that's where we can trap the virus, okay? So parents need to hear this. So that means, especially in younger classes, that if somebody tests positive, then any known contacts, and that means anybody who did not meet all three criteria, they were not masked or were within 6 feet for more than 15 minutes, that's a positive contact. If you didn't have all three things, masked, greater than 6 feet, less than 15 minutes, that's a positive contact. Those people also have to go home for 14 days. Let's dive into that further, because I think people have heard that, but they don't really know what that means. So that means that Mrs. Jones' first grade class, Johnny, tests positive. Johnny goes home for 10 days. Johnny's entire class goes home for 14 days. This is important. Schools need to do this, because if you do not conservatively isolate the known contacts, then we're operating blindly. That's where we really have control. But then second is Johnny goes home for 10. So Johnny goes home for 10 days. His class goes home for 14 days. Johnny's older brother, Mac, hope I remember all these names. Mac is going to be home for 24 days. Because Mac needs to be home for the entire time that Johnny is home, which is 10 days. At day 10, Johnny stops being contagious. Mac's isolation of 14 days now starts at day 10. That's 24 days that Mac, the older brother, is home. Parents need to know this. And not all schools are enforcing this, but if you look at the CDC guidelines even now, when they have scenarios, they do now say this. So again, if we wish to keep schools open, to keep the majority of kids in school, help schools stay open, then we have to be super conservative and super strict about known positive contacts, okay? There you have it. Those are the three things. Again, schools need to look at what they are doing for each of those three things to decrease COVID from walking in the door, decrease transmission within the hallways, and if they do have it, to rapidly identify and very conservatively quarantine. I know you're gonna have a lot of questions for me, so please put them in the comment sections below. Please share this. Share this with teachers, share this with parents, because again, this is not a la carte. You cannot say, we're gonna do some testing and symptom checkers so people don't need to wear masks, or we're gonna wear masks so if you have a positive contact, we're not gonna make you go home. No, especially in the beginning, there is no a la carte here. If we want to keep our teachers safe, our students safe, we want to be able to keep schools open, let schools open and keep them open, we have to do the entire thing. Let me know what you want to know. Let me know what your other questions are. I'm Dr. Darria. Stay well, and I'll talk to you soon.